it's always hard to say when somebody asks me, what's the most accurate film of that era? And in terms of the topography and the cinematography and just the daily life on a wagon train, it's really, really accurate. But that's really where the accuracy's in.
Welcome back, everyone, to Historians React. We are here at the Oregon-California Trails Association Library in Independence, Missouri. And today we are here to react to what we believe to be some of the more historically accurate and inaccurate films depicting the trail era in Western expansion.
I had you people try to get a little track lead, not to jump around like a bunch of Kansas City.
So Travis, you brought, not Miller's Crossing, that's a completely different film.
I brought Meek's Cutoff.
Meek's Cutoff, not even close.
Yeah, Meek's Cutoff is a 2010 film by the director Kelly Reichardt. She entered that into the Venice Film Festival in New York, Toronto, Sundance. It did really well. It's shot in 1:133 ratio. You get that wide landscape.
Very cinematic, yeah.
Very cinematic. You're out there in the Great Basin, the high desert of Central Oregon, mostly where they filmed near Burns and Hines, Oregon. So you get that very accurate depiction of what the trail was like in the movie Meek's Cutoff. You know, it only grossed $1.2 million, so it's not a widely seen movie, but Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. He lauded it highly. It really does depict daily life in a wagon train accurately in that it's mostly tedium. And this movie can be tedious. So don't go into it expecting a lot of action. Don't go into it expecting, fights between cowboys and Indians like the old Hollywood Oregon Trail movies. It's none of that, really. It's just people struggling to make their way west and all that entails.
A lot of land downhill.
We need water. That much I know.
And as we get deeper into this, we can talk a lot about the actual history as opposed to what's depicted in the film. I will say, there's 1,000 to 1,500 people actually on Meek's Cutoff in 1845. What you see depicted in the film really is just 3 families and Stephen Meek guiding them. Obviously, as we already discussed, this is a very low budget movie. It would be really impractical to get 1,500 people with all their thousands of cattle and horses and oxen out there as well. So it's scaled down for that. I mean, that's probably the one thing most historians would jump on, is the fact that it is hugely scaled down. But she didn't have a Steven Spielberg budget. She had a Kelly Reichardt budget.
Quick synopsis of the film. It follows 3 families crossing Meek's Cutoff in 1845 and the tedium, hardships, and really the realities of what the trails were like in the middle of the 19th century.
Yeah, so Stephen Meek had crossed this before. It was an old fur trapper's trail, and Malheur Lake, when he first crossed it, was a really robust lake. What he didn't know was that a drought had ensued, and he told these people, they reached a place called Farewell Bend, which today is a state park in eastern Oregon right on the Snake River. And Joe Meek, one of his brothers, also a really renowned guide and mountain man, convinces them to follow their brother Stephen. Said, "We'll save you weeks. There's water. You're gonna get to the Willamette Valley a lot faster." So anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 decide to follow the Malheur River out there. But the problem was, when they get to where the lake should have been, the drought has rendered it mostly just stagnant pools unsuitable for drinking water. So now people are reduced to literally eating grass. It's a land of lava flows that really comes through clearly in the picture. The oxen's hooves are getting cut up, and the ox just refuse to move anymore. It hurts, so they lay down, and they're now left with the option of basically slaughtering their oxen and carrying what meat they can. They had to abandon a huge percentage of the wagons along the way as well. Obviously, as the oxen become lame, they can't continue to pull. And what ultimately should have been a 2-week shortcut winds up being a 5-week travesty.
That's what you think, that we're lost?
I'd say that seems about the right word for it.
We're not lost, we're just finding our way.
You said it had been mules for fur traders. I mean, but a mule with a couple of packs on it is 1/10 of the weight of a wagon being pulled by oxen at this point, because those wagons are 3,000 to 6,000 pounds, depending on how big, what kind of wagon it was and how loaded down it was.
You got to remember, this is 1845. There hadn't been many wagon trains make it to Oregon yet.
No, this is the very first wave of...
Yeah, you're early. I mean, obviously, you had some of the missionaries came out in the late 1830s. You had the Bidwell Bartleson party that came through in 1841, but maybe only...
Bush Simmons in 1844, right before that. But but
1845 is very early in wagon train travel. We're only talking like 1,000 to 1,500 people, whereas by 1849 it's tens of thousands of people heading west every year. Up until then, you had smaller wagon trains within a wagon train of about 25 people. Keep in mind, this was a 5-mile long wagon train, and they were making 20 to 25 miles a day until the water starts to peter out, until the landscape becomes rugged. Now they're making 5 miles a day. So people are starting to question Stephen Meek's wisdom, knowledge. Is he even being truthful? We think 24 people died in that wagon train, mostly women and children. In fact, at the end of the travails, one of the fathers of one of the children that died wants to hunt Stephen Meek down and kill him.
God knows where he's taking us.
Is he ignorant or is he just plain evil?
Who knows what's over that hill? Could be water. Could be an army of heathens.
You already mentioned how that in the film it's only depicted as 3 families. In reality, it was, close to 1,500 people at the time that were taking the crossing there in 1845. What other major differences from reality were there between the film and the actual events that occurred?
Well, probably the main thing is I mentioned the Indian yellow jacket who has to be hidden in a wagon in reality. Stephen Meek that goes out and finds him and brings him back and hides him in the wagon to help guide them. But in reality, in the movie, he captures him and he wants to kill him because he doesn't trust him. Whereas the other folks in the wagon train want to follow the Indian instead. And there's one point in the movie where Stephen Meek moves to kill him, and Mrs. Tetherow in the movie basically saves him. So that never happened.
No idea what you are dealing with here.
Modern day life, we're so fast, go, go, go. We're in jets, we're on trains, we're in cars. People in the 19th century didn't have that. They were moving at maybe 2 miles an hour. And these films, what I appreciate most about Meek's Cutoff is the fact that it similarly moves at about a 2 mile an hour pace, which most moviegoers can accept. But if you want some realism in what a wagon train was like, this movie captures it.
Yeah, the slower pace is definitely a cinematic tool that is used in westerns, has been for, since probably Sergio Leone and the spaghetti westerns. But life did move a lot slower 150 years ago. The journey out west took months, weeks, as time went on, it got a little bit shorter. You brought some quotes to actually show what reality, from diaries of people who were on the trail, to show what it was actually like.
Here's a day 18 journal entry. Quote, Owensby's company left about noon for a camp 6 or 7 miles ahead. His company are in as much confusion as any set of fellows I have ever seen on the road. Having lost confidence in Meek, many of them are trying to hunt for a road for themselves. Now, I mentioned earlier that these 1,500 or so people were already in small 25 units moving kind of collectively in a 5-mile wagon train, but some elected to continue to follow Meek, some set out further, and it just sort of disintegrates and it becomes mass chaos and mass confusion. And it's a miracle that a lot more people didn't die.
Well, if it's riches you're after, there's riches aplenty. That's the truth. You mark my words.
This video is brought to you by today's sponsor, us. We are a nonprofit. And the easiest way to support us is just like and subscribe and to follow our videos.
Or go to OCTA-trails.org and become a member. We are a membership organization.
But continuing on, I brought a clip today from a 1974 film called Blazing Saddles.
People of the land, the conclave of the New West. Morons.
A couple of reasons I wanted to talk about this. A, we were joking about we wanted to go the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of accuracy on film. But that's not to say there aren't things, movies, TV, all of that, that's the main way a lot of us learn about the past. And even though it is satire, it is, it's a Mel Brooks movie, it's still Western history. It still, puts that impression of what the West was and what Western expansion was into people's heads. In particular, the campfire scene that we are critiquing and talking about today. But I wanted to bring that one up in particular because at the time, canned goods was the new big technology, but yet it wasn't used on the trails all that much, if at all, and not because can opener hadn't been invented yet.
How about some more beans, Mr. Taggart? I'd say you've had enough.
So you got to keep in mind, so canned goods get invented in the early 19th century,
Yeah.
but they didn't really catch on until late 1850s into the 1860s. Most people, they're coming to a place like Independence, and they're getting outfitted. So what does that mean? They're getting their wagon, they're getting their teams, whether usually oxen or mules, but they're also getting their foodstuffs. And you want stuff that's going to be able to survive for 4 to 6 months. So you're mostly going to be taking dried goods. So bags of rice, bags of beans, bags of flour, bags of sugar and salt, dried meats. Of course, you're supplementing by hunting and fishing along the way. It's a pretty tedious diet for 4 to 6 months. What you see depicted in Blazing Saddles, especially in the campfire scene, is a bunch of cowboys sitting around eating baked beans right out of the can. So this movie, though, is looking at, they're building the railroad.
Railroads,
So
yeah.
you're probably late 1860s, 1870s. You're more into what we determine the Wild West cowboy era. You're just probably post-trail era. There are covered wagons, obviously, in this film. There are obviously lots of livestock. Horses were still the main mode of transportation.
Has anybody got a dime? I don't have a dime. Somebody's got to go back and get a shitload of dimes.
This is a comedy about building out the railroad, a comedy that really pokes fun at Westerns. You got to take yourself back to the 1970s. You're coming out of the classic era of Westerns, 40s, 50s, 60s, into the 70s. That's really when it seemed like every other blockbuster coming out of Hollywood in those days was a Western. So, of course, it was natural for a guy like Mel Brooks to spoof that. And boy, did he ever do a wonderful job with that, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. It's Blazing Saddles. You can't improve on perfection.
Well, I mean, obviously it's not for everyone. It's lewd, crude, and vulgar.
Hey, boys! Look what I got here! Hey, where are the white women at?
Well, that'll do it for us today. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you all next time.
That's going to be a rough one. Are you editing this into one piece?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that'll be fine then.